Hello everyone, bringing you a bonus Mannequin video today, and the reason for this is there were two options which topped the poll for Mannequin of the Month this month, one of which we'd already looked at, which is the British soldier in NBC training in the mid-1970s, that came out as Mannequin of the Month, and the second option we're looking at here as the bonus Mannequin video this month, and this is representing the kit of a Sapper of the Royal Engineers serving during the Falklands War in 1982, so serving down south in the Falklands. And this would be a Royal Engineer serving with 5 Brigade, and it's based on the recollections of a friend of mine who served with the Royal Engineers down in the Falklands at the time. I'm quite glad this came to the top of the poll finally, or at least it shared top position. The reason for that is the kit is quite interesting to talk about in that it's basically bog standard kit of the time. There's no civilian rucksack or Bergen here, there's no specially issued rucksack or Bergen. It's very much standard kit as you might have seen in British Army of the Rhine at the time. And then he recalls obviously that support troops, certainly in some instances, weren't able to procure or weren't issued any specialist kit in terms of load carrying equipment for use in the Falklands. So what we see here is very much what you might have seen in training in British Army of the Rhine at the time as well. So the basic kit is obviously the 1958 pattern, combat smock here and the helmet. We'll start talking about this in more detail. We'll start at the top as we normally do with the helmet. And this is the Mark IV steel helmet, the DPM cloth cover over the top, a piece of DPM over the top to camouflage it with a net over that, and then we have scrim added onto that as well. We have a piece of scrim used as a scarf at the neck here, fairly common at the time. And then you have the standard 1968 pattern DPM smock. 2 chest pockets there, 2 lower pockets and arm pockets and so forth, we'll see as we move this round. Standard combat uniform of the time. The web equivalent, as I've already said, is the 1958 pattern. The 2 ammunition pouches here, the belt and the yoke supporting that, and then we can see the hooks here and straps going over the shoulders because the pack is carried on the back. So this is carried in full marching order, very much troops coming ashore is what we're looking at here, so carrying the full kit with them. You can see the sleeping bag actually carried up on the pack and how high that sits up on the shoulders above the top of the pack there. So fairly basic kit at the front here. You can see the left hand ammunition pouch, you can just see the handle of the bayonet sticking out there. Probably won't get a very good view of that because it's tucked away behind the respirator haversack on the hip here. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we move this round and look at some of the other details. Looking at the right hand side of the Mannequin here, if we lift the arm out of the way we can start to see some of the other kit that's carried on the equipment here. We have the water bottle and cup in the standard second issue pouch there, carried around on the belt. On the back we have the sleeping bag strapped to the top of the pack, which obviously attaches to the yoke here and round to the top of the ammunition pouch here, where the little ring is where the yoke attaches. The clip there from this strap attaches the pack there as well. Underneath the pack we have the rear pouches, which it sort of sits on to some degree. It carries a little bit of the weight there, still not really adequate. And then underneath that you have the poncho carried in the cape carrier at the back there as well. And on the back of the pack we also have the shovel, which will be a little clearer to see when we move this round and have a look at the back. So quite a heavy load really carried on the back in a not particularly comfortable manner, with the straps running over the top of the yoke there. As we'll see as we move this round as well, the pack is an early example. Some earlier components from 1958 pattern would still be in use at the time. I've chosen to illustrate that here by including a first issue version of the pack. Looking at the back of the Mannequin here, we obviously have the sleeping bag strapped to the top. Interestingly, something I found out in setting up this Mannequin is the straps on the first issue pack, which is what we have here, are slightly shorter than those on the third issue. I'm not sure about the second issue. So you really have to squash the sleeping bag down to strap it onto the top there. The straps originally, of course, really designed for a rolled greatcoat or parka, not for the bulk of the sleeping bag. So strapping that on there, a little bit tricky. Fairly well packed out pack here, really not adequate for the loads that were needed to be carried at the time, and also it does sag away from the body. The method of carrying it on the yoke is really not adequate for this sort of weight carried on the back for any length of time. You can see the rear pouch is underneath that here, and then we have the cape carrier with the poncho in it here. And on the back we also have the lightweight shovel attached to the fitting on the back of the pack here, coming down, and then there's a strap to retain it against the cape carrier at the bottom there. And obviously the head of this has been camouflaged with a piece of hessian from a sandbag just tied around to stop any shine from the head, the metal head of the shovel there, as you can see. So quite a considerable load carried on the back, and really not the best manner. As I say, we've discussed the issues with the pack previously. The way it attaches to the equipment is really not adequate for carrying any kind of heavy load for any length of time. So that's what we have carried on the back there. You can really see the lean, the way this pulls out from the back of the body. That's one of the issues with this equipment, particularly when you have the sleeping bag up top here, just having to support this a little bit on the mannequin. You may hear the odd creak from the mannequin as we progress through the video, because it is quite a heavy load to have set up on this torso mannequin. But looking at this side here, again, you can see the load on the back as already mentioned. The arm pocket on the combat smock here, side profile of the shape of the helmet there. We lift the arm out of the way. You can see we have the respirator haversack carried down on the side here. Now, respirators were often dispensed with, and these were used to carry extra kit. So you may well find the respirator haversack not with an S6 inside it, but in fact with various other bits of small kit stashed inside there on the belt. So, as I say, what we're looking at here really is kit would be very familiar to soldiers of the British Army of the Rhine at the time. There's nothing really to mark this out as a soldier serving in the Falklands War. All of this is bog standard equipment from the time, no specialist equipment at all really, even the standard sleeping bag rather than any kind of Arctic type. And this is something which is fairly common for supporting troops in 5 Brigade. Some did procure or were issued Bergens and rucksacks and so forth that were much better than this, but some had to make do with the standard 1958 pattern equipment as we have here. So I hope you found it interesting looking at this. As I say, it's interesting to see that not all troops in the Falklands obviously managed to get hold of civilian Bergens and rucksacks to improve the load carrying capacity and the way of carrying, the method of carrying the load compared to the standard 1958 pattern. And as I say, my friend recalls the pack was really not adequate for what he was expected to take with him in the field, and that was a problem. And as I say, some troops had to just make do with what they had. So it's an interesting look at the 1958 pattern in full marching order as well, and you can see the way this is carried up on the shoulders, as discussed before, the way it just hooks into the yoke is not great, and certainly is a backward step compared to some previous designs that Mills had come up with and some previous designs which have been used by the British Army. So a real shame in that regard that the pack is such a poor element of the design. It's a real issue and something that really could have done with improving, but it would take many years to do that, of course, with the introduction of standard issue Bergen rucksacks into the British Army. So hopefully you found it interesting looking at this. I've certainly found it interesting making this video. It's been nice to put this kit together. If you have found this interesting and you'd like to see more, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And of course the corporal tier over on Patreon gives you the opportunity to vote each month on what's going to be covered in Mannequin of the Month. And if you end up with 2 choices topping the poll, we end up with a bonus Mannequin video as well. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address in the description as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.